Hey everyone, I am Mary Alice and I'm going to be sharing my birth story of my third son, Wynston Kade. He is 2 months right now, so he was born February 2nd of 2025. Um, Before I start, I want to just say that I am in no way saying that this is the only way to approach birth, or that I have it all figured out, or that I am somehow more capable than anybody else, because that's not true. I have Jesus, and Jesus is what did this for me, God. Um, I was blown away so many times about how much he helped me, and also postpartum through the whole pregnancy, and since drawing closer to him and having him as my rock in just every part of my life, I've seen so much goodness, and I want to share how that went with my last pregnancy and birth story. But before I start with that, I want to share a little bit about my other two boys' birth stories. My oldest son is almost 5 years old, Tyler, and then my middle son, Finley West, Tyler Jaden, Finley West, and Wynston Kade are their names. Finley is 2.5, and then Wynston is 2 months. But for Tyler, I got pregnant when I was 19, and I was 20 by the time he was born. But his pregnancy, everything just went perfectly smooth. It was great. I listened to a lot of YouTube videos, some nurses, just trying to educate myself, but I know it was definitely not as much of a Christian approach or as natural as it could have been. And so I was just kind of learned by doing, experience a lot of it. But my contractions started, I was at 40 weeks and 6 days, I think, in the evening, and they weren't bad. I think we went bowling and came home and went to bed, and I had a contraction about I think it got to the point during the night it was every half hour, and then closer to the morning they started getting a lot more frequent. And around 8 o'clock in the morning, I think they were at 8 minutes apart. And so we called the hospital about an hour away. I had been seeing a doctor with Tyler. So we went, they said we should probably come in since we're an hour away. And so I got there, and I think I was only a 3 out of 3. And they said it could go another 24 hours. And then they gave me some options, asked if we'd want to do a balloon, which is basically put a balloon in my against my cervix to push it more so that I dilate quicker, and then also a pill vaginally. And it was almost instantly, like before that, I could feel my contractions and they would wake me up, but it was easily manageable. And then as soon as they put that in, it just went crazy. They said even on the screens it's going way higher, like they could monitor them somehow. But they were going way higher than normal. And it was just, they got very close together very quick, and I think that was probably at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock that morning. And it was super intense. I was in a lot of pain, and didn't have much of a break in between. And I think I went in the tub for a while, but if I remember right, it didn't seem to help a whole lot. But I can't remember quite. I think I went in the tub, and then after that got back in the bed, and not too long after that, my water broke and the balloon came shooting out. So it just brought that with it. And then at that point, I think I was maybe a 6. And then I think maybe at some point I went back in the tub. I should have went look back and read my story because I wrote it down, but can't clearly remember all the details. But at some point I threw up, I think, and I ended up throwing up a couple times, but it was pretty much all that day until close to 7, probably more like 6 that night. I was having contractions, and the closer it got to the birth, the less of a break I had, and at the end it was just back to back. I was so exhausted. If I got a little bit of a break, or if the pain would subside a little bit, I would just be out, and then another one would come. But then after a while, I felt like I had to poop, and at that point, nobody was in the room except for Jason. So I just went in and sat on the toilet, and I know that things progressed really fast from there, and I started having just uncontrollable pushing, like I couldn't control it. And I knew what was happening, so I went back on the bed and I contacted the nurses on the button that they have in there to push to get help. And I told them, I'm ready to push, and they checked me and I was at a 10. And so they went and got the doctor and all the nurses. I don't know, was there 5, 6 people in the room, but it was way too much. And they started coaching me to push. She'd tell me when to start and when to stop, and that completely took all of the natural pushing away. And if I would have it over to do with it, if I would know now what I do, if I would have known then what I do now, I would have just not said anything until baby was about to be born. But it just felt like I forced him out of me instead of my body just doing it naturally. And then when he was getting close to being born, he was showing, I think, crowning, and they were watching his heart rate, and it was dropping fast, and I was pushing, but he wasn't coming. And so they said, the doctor told me she doesn't do this very often, but she thinks the best thing to do is just to cut me to get him out quick so his heart rate doesn't keep dropping. And so she numbed me and did that, and it wasn't that painful, but the recovery was rough. But right after, a couple seconds later, after she cut me, he was out and on my chest, and that was amazing. The most amazing experience I think we can ever experience. And yeah, that was wonderful. But then they had to sew me up and started pushing on first of all, I had to birth the placenta. Started pushing on my belly to try to get the placenta out, and I think it came out within 30 minutes, which that's kind of their rule, I think, at hospitals. And then she had to sew me up, and she had numbed me, and I was on some pain medication, so I didn't feel much of it. It was just the thought of the needle or stitching me up. I had to try to think of something else because that was not fun. But we didn't get anything, any eye cream or anything for Tyler. I had said I don't want anything except for the vitamin K shot because I read different things, and I was scared that if we don't do it, he could have bleeding on the brain, because that's what they say. There's a good chance if you don't, and I didn't really know what else to do. So they did give him the vitamin K shot right in the leg, and oh my word, I felt so bad for him, and he just cried a little bit, and then he was fine. But I think he nursed a couple times soon after he was born. He was born at close to 7 o'clock in the evening. And then I was exhausted, but I did have like a burst of energy after he was born because it was just like the oxytocin, everything was just, it was wonderful. But then I tried to get some sleep and he didn't. I think he might have nursed once or twice throughout the night, but then the next morning he was just really sluggish and we had a hard time. I struggled a lot with nursing with him to get him latched. I couldn't do it by myself. I had to have a nurse's help and it just, yeah, I struggled with it a lot until finally the next forenoon, I think it was, they gave him some milk with like breast milk that they had there at the hospital with a syringe, and tried to get some milk in him to give him more strength, but he was just really sluggish, and I think it had a lot to do with the vitamin K shot because my other two babies were nothing like that. But we were able to go home a couple of days later, or the next day, I think, and a very perfectly healthy little boy. The main thing, it was my first one, I didn't really have any after birth pains, but I did have quite a long recovery with my stitches. So that was Tyler, my oldest, and then in between Tyler and Finley, I had a molar pregnancy. That was really rough. I was very sick up until I think about 12 weeks or so. It started getting a little better, but then we were on a Western trip and all of a sudden I just started bleeding. I hadn't had an appointment with a doctor or midwife or anything, so I didn't know it was a molar pregnancy, and I started bleeding and I just figured I'm gonna have a miscarriage. It was not fun. Far away from home and a strange hospital, but we did go into the hospital and it was during COVID, so I had to go in by myself. And they found out it was a molar pregnancy, which is, they say it's a clump of cells that keeps growing. It's just a clump of cells instead of it forming into a baby, which I'm not. I think at some point there is life, and then it doesn't last long, or early on it changes, or the baby dies. There's no life, or however that works, and it just kind of keeps growing without a heartbeat, and it could be cancerous, I think, eventually, if you don't have it removed, and you can't just pass it like you would a normal baby if you miscarry. So I had to have a D&C, which they go in and they have it removed and scrape everything out, and yeah, I had to be put to sleep, or whatever you call that, to do that, and we did that when we were in Oregon on our way home. Went to a hospital, and I came home and I had a lot of bleeding and ended up having to go back again to have it done the second time because the first time it didn't get done right, and yeah, that was a hard time. I lost so much blood, I just felt like a shell left, so drained. But then we were recommended to wait at least 6 months to get pregnant again, and we waited, I think it was around 6 months, a little longer, and then I got pregnant with Finley, and it was a lot of what ifs and stuff. So I got a midwife. I found a midwife and asked her to come out, I think maybe around 9 weeks or something, and she checked, and there's a heartbeat and a healthy baby, and that was very reassuring. Amazing news. And so with Finley, I had a perfectly healthy pregnancy again. I didn't have one single blood draw. I just took supplements. I took herbal prenatals, and yeah, I had a perfect pregnancy. I did feel a little nauseous and um, tired the first month, but nothing major. And then, yeah, I just felt like I thrived. All three of my pregnancies, by 13 weeks to towards maybe 30 weeks, I just felt like I was thriving. I just love that stage. But then with Finley, he was 4 days overdue. We had kind of a false labor, I think about a week before his due date. I thought for sure it was labor. And it just kind of went on the whole weekend, and then by the end of the weekend, everything just stopped and went another whole week and 4 days, I think, before it was actually for real. But then when it started, it was early in the morning. I went to the bathroom, and on my way back, I started dripping a little bit, and it was my water. And all that day, I think I had Braxton Hicks, but my water just leaked where I had to wear a pad, and it never gushed. It was just a leaking all day, and till that evening, I was at the point where I was almost like, is this baby ever going to be born? Because there's so much false labor, and then my water broke, but there was still nothing happening, and we went to bed. I think I went to bed and tried to go to sleep, but then they intensified really fast, and I couldn't sleep anymore. Was it around 10? Yeah, I think around 10 o'clock. It started getting a lot more real, and for a while I managed pretty good, I think. But then the plan was to it just be Jason and I, and the midwife will contact her once we know it's real labor, and then she'll come once the baby's born. And a couple hours in, it was transition. It was for real. Yeah. But this time around, I didn't go on the bed. I was just doing exactly what I felt like doing in my own space. I could do whatever I needed to. I had taken the active labor from Spriggs when I think it was that evening, maybe before I went to bed, and then every 30 minutes I think you're supposed to take it. So I think that had a lot to do with it. It went really fast. I'm thinking maybe 2.5 hours of labor, and then maybe half an hour of pushing towards in the end, and Jason rubbed my back. I thought I couldn't go through any contractions without him rubbing my back. To get me through, it was painful, definitely. But it was fast. 3 hours later, he was born, and we called the midwife somewhere in there, and she lives about an hour away, so she didn't get here until after he was born, and that was amazing, just having Jason and I. He was born and beside the bed, again, perfectly healthy. But he had a short cord, so I had to keep him down kind of on my belly instead of having him on my chest. But I went, all of a sudden, after a couple minutes after he was born, I started shivering. Uncontrollable. My teeth were knocking against each other, just shivering like crazy. So I went in the tub. We had it all set up because I had thought I want to birth in the tub, but when the time came, I was way too hot already, and there was no way I was going to be able to go in that tub. I was like, no way. But afterwards, I wanted to warm up, so I went in there with Finley, just holding him. And then after the midwife came, she made sure everything's going okay, and he couldn't really nurse. After she came, I got out of the tub and went into the bed, and still it took a while before I stopped shivering. I just couldn't get warm. But then, because of his short cord, she cut it soon after she got here so I could nurse him, and he did nurse pretty good. But then it went like 3 hours until the placenta finally came out, and that was almost an extension of labor. It was hard. I don't think it was quite like the end of labor, but it was still hard, and I was exhausted by the end of that. Finally, it came out, and then I could actually sit down and enjoy my baby and not have those contractions keep coming. And he was, yeah, perfectly healthy, no problems at all, and he gained really fast, a very chubby little guy. That was, yeah, he was a fun baby, very easygoing, and I think just easier in general because it was my second baby with Tyler. There was a lot of learning new things. But yeah, that was a lot of fun having two little boys, and they very quickly started entertaining each other. I think it's definitely easier having two than one in most ways. There's definitely more responsibility, but they can have a lot of fun together, and they're almost 5 and 2.5 now, and they have so much fun together. So that was Tyler and Finley, and then with Wynston, we had thought, we were thinking about doing adoption or foster, feeling led to do that, and I think we'll still look into that at some point. So we had just kind of like, I had just told God, whatever he wants for us, we're completely open to his plan, and we weren't using any birth control or watching us in any way. But it went like 4 months, so I think I just needed time. I felt like I had my hands full, and I just wasn't quite ready to get pregnant again. So it felt like God just gave me an extra amount of time to feel more ready, I guess. So I got pregnant, and I think I didn't know it until over a month. I did it with how it went, getting pregnant for like 4 months. I was like, I didn't really keep track very well of my cycle, but then I think when it was a week or two later, over my monthly period, when I should have had my period, I just felt off. I was like, I am either pregnant or then something is wrong. Because my stomach and everything just felt so weird or different. And I couldn't really remember with having it that much with other boys. There was definitely some discomfort here and there, just feeling weird with everything shifting, making room for the baby. But I felt pretty good. I think I was more nauseous this time. It seemed more like it did with my molar pregnancy than my other 2 pregnancies, and I prayed a lot with this pregnancy because different times, so many times, I just felt the need to really pray over this baby. And I did many a time. When I think I was 12 or 13 weeks, we were in Ohio, with where Jason's family's from. We were staying at their house, and we were getting ready to come home. We actually went to the airport, and then our flight got canceled, and then we're on the way back to his parents' place until the next morning, I think, when our flight got rescheduled. And on the way back, I started feeling kind of crampy. I just figured maybe it's just a pregnancy thing and it'll be fine. But then soon after we got there, I went to the bathroom and I started bleeding, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a miscarriage. And yeah, that was rough. There again, I wasn't home. And I just took it easy. I didn't move any more than I had to, and I just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And I felt God so close, and I believe it was definitely a miracle that I didn't lose him then. But then it kind of quit then, and we came home, and I thought everything was fine. And then my midwife did stop by when we came home, I think the next day, and she checked, and everything was fine. He was moving so much, and everything looked great. But then the next day already, I think I started bleeding really heavily. I thought it was hemorrhaging almost. It was so much blood. But then I went to the emergency room the next day. Then it had slowed down a lot. But then they did an ultrasound, and then again the baby was good, but they found like clumps of blood between my uterus and the sac where the baby is in. And it was draining out. They have a name for it. And it was something that happens, I don't think it's very often, but it's still, they knew what it was. And it was nothing to worry about. They said it should take care of itself in the second trimester. So I had to really watch, though. I couldn't do much at all, or I would just start bleeding a lot. So I spent a lot of time in the chair, and I definitely had to have help from family over that time. And plus all of that, I had a terrible cold that went for a whole month. I think I just couldn't get over it. My body was kind of drained from the other things, that pregnancy and the blood loss, I think. But it felt like after I got over that, I was probably getting close to 16 weeks, maybe more, before I finally felt really good. And yeah, I prayed, like I said, many, many times, and I know it was God that, yeah, we have a healthy baby. So my birth story, I was, well, over Christmas time. Actually, no, it was more like the first couple weeks in January. Our family was here. We had our family Christmas late. But over that time, I had so many Braxton Hicks, and a couple times I thought it was labor again. It was, again, so drawn out. And this time I had eaten dates regularly the last 6 weeks. And it felt like my body was maybe ready, but the baby wasn't, or something, because I had so many Braxton Hicks, and different times they got pretty uncomfortable, and I was just so tired of it. Eventually, my midwife gave me, what is it? It's basically something to calm the muscles, uterine muscles, to not make it contract. So I was, 40 weeks and 5 days, I think. With all 3, I went over, and I thought I was going to go early because I had false labor, but then the last couple weeks, just one day after the next went by, and no baby, and I was getting kind of impatient. With this one, I was definitely not ready to have him as early as I was, especially with Tyler, but 2 little boys, it just took me a lot longer until I had all my things ready, where I felt like I was ready to have him. But let's see, it was the night before, or the day before, Saturday. I was trying to kind of wrap up everything. I still wanted to clean the car, and then I felt like I pretty much had everything cleaned and ready, deep cleaned, and I felt pretty ready. So I cleaned the car that day, inside and out, had everything ready, got the car seat in, and I did a lot of walking that day, and I had Braxton Hicks the whole time, but I had that every single day for the last couple weeks before, so it just felt kind of normal at that point. But I did try to do a lot of walking and just try different things to hopefully get baby out. So that evening I did the different positions to try to make that he was for sure in the right position. And I went up and down the stairs sideways quite a bit, and trying to think what else. After I went to bed, I did some nipple stimulation to just really try to get things moving, and it did work. But before we went to bed, we had a little worship jam out session, and that was really good just to get my mind in the right place. And the whole time, the last 3 months, but especially the last month, I spent a lot of time just praying very specifically in what I wanted for my birth, down to the smallest details, and filling myself with the Word of God, with God's promises, verses that spoke truth, and I had a whole list of them printed out, and that I would just look at a lot and just speak over me and try to just take truth in, only truth and nothing else, and just completely change my perspective of birth, almost like, renewing my mind in that part of life was just have a different view of birth, that it can be incredibly amazing, and how amazing God created it to be, and that it doesn't have to be a horrible thing to be dreaded, but that I could actually look forward to it, and I was looking forward to it. I was very excited, and I couldn't wait to see what God was going to do in it. We were worshiping that night and went to bed with the music still playing, and I think I kind of dozed off and on. I definitely didn't sleep very soundly for a while, but then at 1 o'clock or 1:30, I think it was, maybe 1:30, I all of a sudden woke up. I felt like somebody just went and like tapped me on my low back, and immediately there was so much pressure, and it was my water breaking. I didn't realize that's what it was right away. It took me a little bit to figure out what was going on, but I got up then, and trying to think, I was sleeping. I got up and I stood up, and I think I made it to the bathroom before much came out. And it didn't just flow out. It dribbled the rest of my labor. It just dribbled. So I had to keep a pad underneath me wherever I went. I had a bunch of those puppy pads scattered around in the house, in the bedroom, and in the bathroom. So that took care of that. But that was an answer to prayer. I prayed that that my water would break when labor started, so that I would know it's for real, because I didn't want it to be painful. I prayed that it wouldn't be painful, and I was like, if it's not painful, then how am I going to know it's real? So it started out with my water breaking. That was definitely God. And then I prayed that I would have a little bit of time to pray with God and just kind of get my mind in the right place before labor would start. And there again, it was exactly that. And then my contractions started coming, and it took me a while to, even though my water had broken again, to be convinced that is a real thing, because it just felt like there was so many false alarms so many times throughout my pregnancy towards the end that, it took me a while to be really convinced. But I think my contractions started coming every 7 minutes or so. For a while, I timed them on my app, and I was in bed, out of bed a little bit for a while, and once I saw they were pretty regular, then I told Jason, I think it's the real thing, and he took him a little bit to, or it took a little bit to convince him, a little bit of time, that it was the real thing too, because yeah, we had thought it was going to happen so many times and it didn't. But we got up then and had some time to get things ready. We have to haul our water from town, and we didn't have enough water. I was wanting to be in the shower a lot. Well, actually, Jason didn't go get water until an hour or two after I got started, but he made a fire out in our stove to make everything warm. It was kind of cold in here, and he got the fire started, but it was windy and it didn't ventilate very well and started smoking in here, so we were trying to get the smoke cleared out. And yeah, I was having contractions every so often. I think they were still maybe 6 minutes apart, but I just stopped and breathed through them and went on. They weren't painful at all. And we spent, a little bit of time out by the fire. And then as time went on a little bit, I just walked around some and played worship music. I had worship music playing the whole time, and that was amazing. There were so many times where I didn't listen to every song all the way through, but little pieces of the song, of the lyrics, just caught my attention and brought my mind back to a place of peace and trusting God. And yeah, I would definitely recommend doing that. That was amazing. And I was just kind of back and forth doing whatever felt right. I got in bed a couple times because I was sleepy. I just wanted to sleep. It was early in the morning. 1:30 is when it started, and then he was born at 6:13, I think. But for the first 4.5, 5 hours, I just kind of moved around and did whatever felt right. And I did end up in the shower then, and I spent, I think, a couple hours in there up until I started really pushing, because it just felt amazing. I had a little stool in there that I would sit on between contractions, but when I would get a contraction, I'd stand up and let the water, the warm water against my low back, and I had no pain. It was amazing. I told Jason I was having a good time, which was, life-changing. So different than the others. And I was hungry, so he went and he got me a spoonful of honey a couple times to lick on, and some cheese, and different snacks that I was snacking on in between contractions. And I just hung out in the shower for, I think, a couple hours, and I think I dozed off here and there when I sat down on the chair, leaning my head against the wall. During that time, Jason went to get water. I was not sure if that's a good idea, because it's like, what if baby's born before he gets back? But it only took 15, 20 minutes. Then he was back again, and I did get out of the shower for a little bit because I was getting too warm. At one time, I almost fainted. I'm not sure, that was before I had the honey and some snacks. I think I was just weak and a little too warm. After I ate, then I felt amazing. It was amazing how it just gave me a burst of energy. I would definitely recommend the honey, licking on honey. That's a good thing to eat during labor. And then Jason would rub my back when I was out of the shower. After he came back from getting water, he just stayed with me the whole time. It was just the two of us again. But somewhere in that time, this time Jason wanted the midwife to be here at least. She doesn't have to be in the room, but just to know she's here, because it was, I think he felt a lot of responsibility the last time. Just if something would happen, that it would be all on him. So we decided this time the midwife will be here, and she was just out on the couch, and Jason and I were in the bathroom. And I started pushing in the shower, it just felt like I just wanted to do something during the contractions because they were getting very, very intense. So I did start pushing some during my contractions. Excuse me. I think I'm losing my voice and talking too much. But they started getting really intense, and I had to get out of the shower. It was just too hot. So I leaned over the counter at the bathroom every time I had a contraction, and then in between I would have to walk around. Even when he was like low, almost coming out, I had to move around in between contractions, and when I had a contraction I would kind of squat down. But it was, the whole time I had enough time in between contractions, even towards the end. I think it was 2-3 minutes in between, that I could refocus and tell myself, or I guess just speak truth over my mind, and to not give up, to not get overwhelmed, to not tell myself I can't do it anymore, because I could. And so that helped so much, was just to refocus every time in between a contraction. And then I felt like by the time another one came, I was a little more stable and ready to just push through it. And towards the end, through the pushing, the whole time I felt like I just need to get this baby out. I just felt like an urge to just get him out. And so I pushed extra a lot through the pushing. And there was one time where he was down quite a ways already, and then after the contraction I felt him just kind of pop back up in my belly or my uterus and move around a little bit, and then he went right back down, re-engaged before the next contraction, and it was like he was just moving into the right position to be born. That was amazing. I never felt anything like that. I could feel every part of it. And then he was, I don't know, I think I was probably pushing more like an hour this time from start to finish, because I started pushing probably before I would have had to, but I just felt like I needed to get him out. And another thing I prayed was that I would have no ring of fire, which I definitely did, I think, because just pushing him through, it stretched way faster than it would have wanted to, or needed to, but I just wanted to get him out, and it did definitely burn, but I had a tiny tear, nothing that needed any care or anything. And after a while through the pushing, I was very loud. Jason he said every time, I think after all 3 of them were born, that he thought I was gonna die by the way he sounded. This time I was like, it helped so much if I just like roared. It got my mind off of the intensity of it, because just all the pressure of the baby coming out was just overwhelming. And the louder I was, the more I felt, the easier it was. So I just roared through every contraction. And I know my midwife was out here. She knew exactly what was going on. And she waited until it got quiet, and then she came in. But he came out. He was born at 6:13. So this time my labor was a little longer than it was with Finley. I didn't take any active labor this time, which I know that made it different last time, but I definitely preferred it this way, a little longer and not as intense. I had nice breaks in between, and that was amazing. I wasn't near as worn out this time, and I didn't have excruciating pain like I did with the others. God definitely answered my prayer in that way. It wasn't pain-free with all the pressure towards the end, with just pushing through to get him out, because I pushed things faster than they probably wanted to. So it was extremely intense, just the pressure, just feeling like my body could explode. But he was born at 6:13, I was leaning over the bathroom counter, and Jason was standing behind me, and he was, I think, concerned that it was just going to drop on the floor, but he was right there to catch him as soon as he came out. So Jason got him, caught him, and then I sat down and he gave him to me. And another thing I prayed this time was that the cord would be long enough to put him on my chest, and it definitely was. I could easily put him on my chest, but he was pretty blue in his face. He cried right away. It was more of a weak cry, but he cried, and in a couple minutes his color was back to normal. He was pretty alert, and then again just perfectly healthy, and such a miracle. It was amazing. And I just sat there and enjoyed the moment for a little while, and then we discovered there was a knot in the cord. And I think that's probably why he was so blue, because it put a lot of pressure on that knot when he was being born, and he couldn't get as much oxygen. And I know that was why I felt the urge to just get him out. I know it was God, because it could have, if it would have went too much longer, it could have been pretty bad. It was so God. I know it was. The whole time I knew God was with me. And then I sat there for a little bit, just taking in the moment. You have to. That's like the most rewarding thing ever. After working to get the baby out, is to have the baby on your chest. It's nothing like it. And then I went and laid in on the bed a little bit, and he nursed. I just wanted to rest a little bit. And another thing I prayed this time was that my placenta would come out quickly and easily, not have all of those contractions after giving birth yet to get my placenta out. And I was able to nurse Wynston for a while until he was done. And then my contractions started coming back. And I had a couple, and Allie cut the cord, or I think this time she cut it. Last time Jason did, but she cut the cord, and then I could move around a little bit and try to get the placenta out. So I just went in on the toilet and waited, or pushed a little bit for a couple contractions, and that came out. And I think it was more like 45 minutes to an hour after he was born this time. Much easier. If I look back at the pictures this time, my eyes looked bright, and I looked so much better than I did in the pictures that Jason has of me right after Tyler and Finley was born. My eyes were barely staying awake, and I just looked exhausted. But this time, it was just a huge difference. It was so God. And so many details. There were definitely a couple things in my specifically detailed prayers that he didn't answer, like the exact day I wanted him to be born, and a few things like that, that I think were a little more selfish prayers. But it was amazing. Another thing I struggled with Finley a little bit was to bond. I felt like it took me a couple days to feel bonded with him, and I prayed that I would not have that this time, and it felt like right from the start this time I felt so close. We had such a close bond, me and the baby. That was so amazing. He latched perfectly from the start, never had a problem with nursing. Finley wasn't either. And it's just like when we let our bodies do what God designed them to do, things work so perfectly well. It's when the world's ideas, or I guess ideas that are not the way God intended it to be, get in the way. That's when it seems like it creates problems. And it was amazing. Those first hours after the placenta came out, I was in bed and I just relaxed and rested, and That was at 6:13 when he was born, and I also prayed that the boys would just sleep, that he would be born at night and everything would be over by the time they wake up in the morning, and that was another answered prayer. They were upstairs in their bed through the whole thing and didn't wake up until a couple hours after he was born, and we were all settled in, and Allie had left, the midwife, and we were just in bed, and then they came down and stairs into the bedroom, and there was a baby. It was so fun, showing them their little brother. Finley wanted to hold him right away and was giving him all kinds of kisses. But Tyler, it took him a little bit to even want to hold him. But now he's the one that just wants to hold him all the time and just absolutely adores him. Finley loves him too, but he's definitely got a little more of a rough love. Kisses that are a little rough. So it was amazing. It was definitely my easiest birth by far. It was a little bit more challenging afterwards, of course, with having two other children, but I think people asked me if it was easier going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, and I think there was some things that were easier this time and some things that were easier last time. With 3, you just have more messes and more laundry and more little ones to invest time in, and because they all need their cups filled, especially when there's another little one around and things are so different. But I prayed for a smooth transition, and it was so good. Jason was at home a lot of the time for the first month almost. It was February and the weather wasn't very nice to work outside, so he was at home a lot, and that was so helpful. Plus my mom and sisters, even my 10-year-old brother helped me out so much. I got so much help, plus so many meals. It was amazing. That was another answered prayer. I was kind of worried about afterwards how it's all going to go, how I'm going to be able to rest with having 3 little guys. And God answered that prayer exceedingly abundantly more than I could have asked or imagined. I got so well taken care of. I recovered so quick. I did really pray that I wouldn't have much cramping or afterbirth pains, and I just, every time one came, I rebuked it, and I just asked God to help me, and it made the biggest difference to not have overwhelming discomfort every time I would nurse or a birth or afterbirth pain would come. But I did have gas pains a couple days after he was born. That was the most miserable thing of the whole thing, I think, was, I'm not sure, was it just everything changing in my stomach, but I didn't experience it with my others, so I'm not quite sure. I did run out of collagen, which seemed to help things work through better when I was pregnant, and I did run out of that a couple days before he was born, and then I didn't get more until about a week or so after, and I think that had something to do with it, but that was the most miserable part of it. But within a couple days, my uterus felt like a little ball about this size all the way down, and I was worried that it was too low, or I wasn't sure, is something wrong? And my midwife checked me, and she's like, you're already healed to the point where usually it would take a week to get to this point. That was like 2 days later. And I really prayed that I would be able to heal up quickly, because I knew I'm not going to be able to just lay around as much as I should with 2 other little guys to keep up with. So that was another big answer to prayer. I felt so good. About, I think it was 5 days after Jason and I went to a couple's night out because I was so ready to just get out of the house, and I just felt so good. It's so amazing when you can look down at your stomach, and it definitely doesn't look the greatest, but it's not that huge bulge, and you can get back into the pre-pregnancy clothes. And I like to wear leggings to just hold it all in, and that was, yeah, so much fun. It felt so good to get out. I definitely did get tired a lot quicker than I normally would, but it was, yeah, it was great. I got a lot of care and was able to just rest a lot, and that I know made a big difference in my recovery. And it, yeah, after the first 3 days, I think 3 to 5 days, my bleeding had almost stopped already. And but then at 3 weeks, I think it was that it started back again, and I was just doing too much. I should have tried to take it more easy. There were some things that I just couldn't really, I just had to do some things. But yeah, if it wouldn't have been for that, I think I wouldn't have had any bleeding after like the first week especially. And that was another, yeah, just the healing so quickly. And the transition, everything went so well. The whole time, even now, I'm just like, be in the moment and soak up every moment of this time, because the newborn stage just goes so quickly, and just trying to relish all the moments. And also with my older children, just not always wish for the next stage and can't wait until they're this age or can do that, because then that stage comes and then you're hoping for the next. And God has really been teaching me to just see the beauty of living in the moment, and also the peace that comes with that. Not worrying about trying to keep up with all the housework, and that's really not what matters. What matters most is these children that He's given to us, and when they're grown and look back, they're not going to think about the messy house. They're going to think about how much time Mom and Dad spent with them. And yeah, that is my goal, is to just pour into them and let the other things go that aren't so necessary. I know you have to wash the dishes at some point, and there are things that have to be done, but most times it's not. When the toddler needs attention, it can wait. And that's been challenging for me, because I want to get all my work done and have everything cleaned up, and then sit down and have fun playing with my children. That's not how it works. I've had to learn that, and it's not been easy. I'm still on that journey. But God, He's the one that helps me every day. The more out of control things are, the closer I am to God, and the more I lean on Him, and the more miracles I see. Throughout the whole birth and postpartum, even now still, I have my hands full, and if I don't rely on God, things just fall apart, including me. And it's amazing to just see how God can move, and even the smallest details. Just pray and ask Him to help you in whatever it is that you're struggling with. If it is that you need to go to the bathroom and the babies are crying and you just want to have a bathroom break, or you just want to get the dishes washed, or you need to make supper, whatever it is, just tell God, and just surrender it, and you'll have amazing peace. Plus, it'll just work out. It has over and over and over for me, and I've just been amazed many times at how God has just helped me. So yeah, that's my birth story, and I pray it can be very encouraging and uplifting, and give you a good view of birth, because I know God had an incredible plan from the beginning for birth. It wasn't meant to be a horrible, almost dying thing. It's meant to be beautiful and incredibly powerful. And yeah, after going through it, you feel like Superwoman. Like you could do anything after doing that. It's very empowering. But all glory to God. He helped me in so many ways, and He still does. So I pray this blessed you. And something I've been thinking about is maybe sharing some of the things, the products I used, supplements during pregnancy or postpartum supplies. If you're interested, I might make a video just showing you all of the things I used, because this is my third one and I feel like I've learned a lot with every one of them, things that can really help and that are very useful, very helpful. So if you are interested, just let me know in the comments and I'll try to get time to do a video like that if you would like to. Thank you for watching, and I pray that this blessed you.